Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to learn the basics of Highrise Studio, how to install Highrise Studio, and how to get started with Highrise Studio. Now first things first, go to Google Chrome and search for highrise.game, and in highrise.game go to create. This will take you to create.highrise.game. Then go to Highrise Studio and click on the download button here. If you are on Mac, this would say download for Mac. And if you scroll down, you're gonna see the requirements for your device. You scroll up and you hit download. Now, once the download is done, go to downloads, click on Studio Hub installer, click next. Now this warning is because I had Highrise Studio Hub installed and I'm gonna install it anyway. So I'm just gonna say yes. Create a desktop shortcut, click next and install. Now once that's done, click launch Highrise Studio Hub and finish. Now that we are in Highrise Studio Hub, there are a few things that you need to do. Now, you're not going to see all the projects. I have them because I used Studio Hub before and I had to delete it to install it again and show you how it's done. Now, first, go to install Unity Editor or hit on install Unity Editor. And this will recommend you to install 2022 and 30F1. So click install now and wait for it to load. This might take a while, by the way. Now that you installed Unity, just click OK. Now that's done, go to new project and here you will find a bunch of templates to choose from. In this video, we're going to choose 2D platformer and I'm also going to give this project a name and I'm going to call it my 2D platformer and I'm going to create a project. Alright, now that you load into Unity, you are gonna receive few messages like this: completing domain or compiling scripts, so just let it load and wait for it to finish. Now that is done, you might be wondering what the heck is this? Now, this is basically where everything goes. Everything you edit, everything you add is in here, and I already have a video explaining how to navigate Unity, so you might want to check that out. I will link it in the description or on the card top right corner of this video, so please check that out if you're new to Unity. Now let's get started with the basics. Now the first thing I want you to do is go to simulator, and in the simulator tab, if you click on the Apple iPad mini, you can click on install additional devices, which will enable or unlock more devices for you to test, which I always do and I recommend. So click on that and wait for this to load. Now that loaded, you can select more devices from here. So if you search, for example, iPad and choose the 12.9, which will make the view look better, and if you can search, for example, any phone that you have, it will display the game or how the game will look like on this screen or this device. I usually work with 13 Pro Max or iPad Pro 19 or 12.9. Now first things first, this is going to be a 2D template, so I'm going to go through the basics on how to use this template, how to import assets, and how to download assets if you want. Now, if you select the scene, which is this one, and you click number 2 on your keyboard, or you go to 2D, this will display the scene in a 2D view. Now, this scene right here is a parallax scene, meaning that every or each object you see is basically a layer. So if I select, for example, the mountains, if I scroll back, you can see that the layers or the mountain are one layer. So if I select the move tool and I move them, I am basically only moving the mountains. Now Ctrl Z to go back, and if I select the clouds or the background in the back, I'm also selecting the clouds. Same goes for the trees right here. So if I select the trees, I am moving the trees. Now there are a few things that you need to understand here and when it comes to Parallax. Basically, if you go to the inspector panel right here on the right side, there's something called order in layer. Now, if I select the first background, which is the clouds, you're gonna see that this has the lowest order, meaning that it will be all the way on the back. So anything that is above or more than -10 will be in front of that layer. So for example, if I put this to -8, you can see that the other background now is hidden. It's because it overrides the layers. So I'm going to keep this as 10 or -10. Same goes for the background 2, it's -9, and the background 3, it's 8. Now this will only work if you have a sprite renderer, meaning that the sprite renderer is basically a 2D image that you put into the project to make it look like an object or something that you can mess around with. You can see here size and a lot of different things. Now that we are done with the layers, we're going to talk about the Parallax Script. So I'm going to hit play here to start the game, but before you do play, make sure you log in with your account. So if I log out right now because I was logged in and I hit sign in and I simply put my username here and the password if I remember my password. Alright, so you basically hit play and wait for it to load. Now that I am in the scene, you can see here that there's something called, or there you can see a virtual player. This is not a player, this is not a real player, it's just a virtual player. It's used for testing and stuff like that. So if you want to disable or if you want to hide it, you right click on the virtual player right here and you hit close tab. If you want to bring the virtual player back to the scene, there's a small button here that says plus. Click on it and this will open up, and just move it and drag it, put it wherever you want, and you can spawn as many as you want if your PC handles them like that. Now I have 4 virtual players and you can also move around with them as you want. I'm going to close the virtual players now and I'm going to focus on the Parallax script that I talked about. So if you go to the hierarchy and you expand this room scene, or you select the objects in the background, for example, the trees, you can see here that the parallax factor is set to 0.6. And if I select the BG2, which is the background to the mountains, it's set to 0.7, and the BG1, it's set to 0.8. Now, this is basically the offset of the X. For example, if I move right now, or if I pan the camera around, you can see here that the backgrounds on the back are also moving, but the trees and the mountains are moving a little bit faster than the backgrounds all the way back, which is the clouds. And this is because of the factor of the X, or the parallax factor. So for example, this BG3 has a 0.6 and the BG2 has 0.7, meaning the offset of this background will always be 0.7 of the camera. So if I move around, you can see that it's moving. Now, if I set this to 1, it means that it's static and it will move with the camera. If I set this to 0, it means it will not move if I move the camera. But any number between 0 and 1 will make it move when I move the character or when I pan the camera around. Now the same thing applies to not just the background, but also the tiles that we have here. So if I zoom in using the scroll wheel and I select the bush, for example, or let's see which bush or which object is moving. Tree. Okay, so the tree is also moving, and you can see here the parallax script is set to that camera, or that, I mean, set to that object, and it's set to 0.1. And if I move the camera around, you can see that this tree is slightly moving with the camera. It's not, there's no delay because it's 0.1, which is really low. But if I select this tree, for example, it's set to 0.2, and you can tell the difference that it is actually moving. And same goes to the, for example, the bush right here. It's set to 0.15. You can see that it's also moving. Now, this bush right here doesn't have the parallax script, means that it's static and it will move with the camera. So if we move it, it will move with the camera. So if we select this too, it doesn't have a parallax script, meaning that it will also be static and it will not move with the camera. And same thing goes for the order and layer. If we set this to, for example, -5, you can see here that the tree is above the ground, which is not what we want. So 0.1 would fix that. Same goes to everything. So for example, if we move our player here and we want that bush to be in front of our player, we basically change the order and layer to something like -1 or 0, I think. Okay, no, so -1. This will make the bush behind our player, but we are going to keep it at 2 because we want it to be in front of our player. But if we move this tree, for example, let's say, we can't move it because it has parallax script, so I'm going to pause and then I'm going to move it. Now you can see that the tree is behind the bush. That's because it's set to -2. 2, and this is set to 2. Now, if we set this to -3, it will be behind the tree. So it's basically just ordering the layers by numbers. So from -10 to, for example, to all the way up to 2. So now if I revert the changes, I go back and I unpause, you can see here that we can also jump. So if we hit the jump, or we hit on this platform, it will make our avatar jump. And if we hit this platform, it will also make our avatar jump. Now we can also move the camera around. We can jump here and we can click on this tree and it will make our avatar sit. Now this is very easy to implement and I will show you in a second. But again, if I get up and I click on the platform up top, it will make our avatar jump and you can see that the camera is moving with us. This is because of the Parallax Script, which I'm going to explain in a second. Now, we explained about the Parallax Script, but let's say you want to add the Parallax Script to any of the objects. And we notice that this bush right here doesn't have one. So if you want to add one, you simply click on or select the object first, and then go to the inspector panel, add component, and search for Parallax Script. Use that, and by default it's set to 0. So you can select, for example, the tree right here, and you can see here that it's set to 0.1. So the best option would be something similar to the tree, which is 0.1 or 0. For example, 1.5, the same as this bush right here. So if I set this to 0.15 and I save Ctrl S and I click play again, and if I move, this will basically make the bush move with me. You can see here that if I'm moving the camera, the bush is also moving. But you don't want this behavior. And why? It's because the bush is set in front of the player. And you don't want to, it looks weird when the player moves and the bush moves when it's in front of the player. And this is why we remove the Parallax Script and we don't put it. We only put it on the objects that are behind the player. For example, the tree, or the tree in the back, or the bush in the back. Because if I move right now, you can see here that it's so weird that this is moving with me. It's like the bush is actually a player, or the bush is acting like a player and it's moving with me or walking with me. But you only want the tree. So I'm going to exit the play mode by hitting play again, and I'm going to select that bush and I'm going to remove the Parallax Script. So 3 dots here and remove component. But before you remove component, you can also set the parallax factor to something like 0.8 just to show you how it works. So if I set this to 0.8 and I save Ctrl S and I hit play again, now if I move, you can see that it's moving way faster. And that is really weird because you don't want it to move like that. It's like I am running behind the bush and trying to catch it. Or the bush is trying to attack me, which you don't want. So I'm going to exit the play mode and I am going to select the bush again. And I'm going to remove the Parallax Script. Now Ctrl S to save, and that's it for the Parallax Script. So now that we are done with the Parallax Script, let's add some more object into this. Now here the view is a little bit far, so I'm going to select another view, which can be iPhone 6 for example, or 13 Pro Max, which is my phone, that's why I always use it. And let's add some more object. Now let's say you want to expand this platform right here, and luckily for us, in this template itself, we already have prefabs. Now, what is a prefab? Prefab is something that you put into the scene. Like, for example, let's say this tile right here, and then this tile itself, you drag and drop it into the scene, which makes it prefab and allows you to use it more than once. So instead of always adding this object and modifying these changes right here, it will apply these changes to every single prefab. And I'm going to show you in a second. So for example, if we click on this one right here and we go to the inspector, we see grass left and we click on it, it will open up this window right here in the project. Now we already have a folder for you called the prefabs, and it has everything right here, including grass mid, grass left. So let's say we want to expand this platform. So I'm going to move around and I'm going to hit Ctrl and I'm going to move this because it's basically it snips. And I am going to add some more tiles or more platforms in here. I can select this and Ctrl D to duplicate, and I can move it like that. Again, Ctrl D to duplicate. Or you can drag and drop this in here. Does that make sense? And if you want to delete it, you can do just backspace. But I am going to add more tiles, so I'm going to move this, and I'm going to select this, Ctrl D to duplicate, and move it around. Same goes for this one. Perfect. Now that is done. Now there's one more thing that you need to worry about now here. If I go to the surface and I show Navmesh here, this will basically show the Navmesh where the player can move. And you can see here that from this line to this line, the player can move, but the player can't move on the new tiles that we just set. And the player can move here on this one and on this one and this one, and it also can jump on these ones, right? So to make the player actually move on the other platforms, we select the platform, and you see here in the platform, there's something called a box collider. Now, the box collider basically is a collider that makes the player or the object tappable, or it can make it basically, you can interact with the object since it has a box collider. And if I exit the 2D mode and I zoom in and I show you, you can see here that you have a better view of this box collider. Meaning that this box collider will actually let us tap on it, so it will allow the avatars to actually move when you tap on this place or this object right here. If we go back to the 2D mode and we find Navmesh in the inspector or in the hierarchy and go to the inspector. Now here you have to bake the Navmesh to make it work. But in the Navmesh, there's something called render meshes and physics collider. By default, it's render meshes, but this template has a physics collider. So make sure you change this to physics collider for this to work, because you basically want to render the physics colliders and not the mesh ones. Once that's done, you can hit bake, and you can see here that our Navmesh is now extended all the way to the end of the tiles. And if we exit the 2D mode, and you can see here that the Navmesh is actually expanded. Now, if we go back to the 2D mode and we hit play, and now we move the camera around and we hit or click on this one right here, you can see that the avatar is actually moving and it is working. Perfect. Now that you know how to add more tiles and we make them clickable or tappable, where you can actually click on them and move, we are going to learn how to add the jumps. Now, if we can select this one right here and we can copy it, but instead of copying one by one, we can basically select this whole thing, this one right here, and I think this is the one. It's not. Oh, it's the floating one. Okay, so you can click on the grass floating left and shift, and you can also click. Okay, so basically, if you select all of them, you can see here that this is what we want, all three tiles. If you click on the first one and you select shift on your keyboard and click on the third one, it will select them all. Now Ctrl D will duplicate them, and then if you select the move tool here, you can basically move them and you can drag them down just like that. Now you can Ctrl S to save, and if you want, you could move them under each other just to make things easier for you to read. And once that's done, you can come to the on the hierarchy and right click, create empty, and you can say, for example, floating. So for example, floating, and then you can say 1, and then you can reset the transforms. You can move this all the way up and then move or select all of them using the same method. Select the first one, shift, and select the third one, move them inside the floating. Now this way, if we move the floating, all of them will move at the same time. Does that make sense? If you don't understand or if you didn't understand, please repeat the video again and you will get it. Now that's done. We are going to check if these has box collider, because we basically going to bake the Navmesh again, so make the avatar move or walk on this platform or this floating area. So I'm going to select the first one and I'm going to remove or exit to 2D mode. And you can see here that there's a box collider, which is also showing in here. Same goes for the left one and the right one. So now to get this Navmesh all the way up top, we go to the Navmesh again and we click on bake. Now you can see that we actually have a Navmesh, but it did cut this one, and that's because of the height between this one and this one. So I am going to select the floating, and I'm going to move it left, and I'm going to move it up, and I'm going to go to Navmesh again, and I'm going to clear, and then I'm going to bake. Now you can see that you can move all the way here, and you can also move here. Now that's done, let's talk a bit about the jumping. So if I go to the 2D mode again, or the view, and I select the jump, which is the point B. So here you can see we have something called jump link. Now this jump link is also duplicated in 1 and 2. And this is between this point, this point, this point, and that point, and A and B here. Now what this do, basically you have 2 points where if you click on that tile, for example, it will make you jump all the way up from this point to that point. So I'm going to duplicate this. So duplicate the jump link, Ctrl D to duplicate it. And we are also going to move it. So I'm going to select the move tool, and I'm also going to move it right here. Now you want to get the B to this one. So you are going to expand the jump link, and you're going to select the B, and I'm going to move this and drag it up. Now you have to make it a little bit slight next to the ground or close to the ground, but a little bit higher to the ground, because if I scroll here you can see that it is on the ground but it's slightly higher. So I'm going to do that like this, and I'm going to select the jump link. Here in the jump link, if you want to add a new one, or if you have a new one without duplicating it, you basically need an off mesh link, and off mesh link handler. Now the speed multiplier basically is the time that it takes to perform the jump. So if I select the jump link, the first one, which is this one, it says here 3. If I select the second one, it says also 3. But since this one is slower, or it's the distance between them is basically closer, you can change the speed multiplier just to make it look better, if that makes sense. Now I'm going to select the third one, which is the one we just created right here. And I am going to double check here that the start is the point A, which is here, you start here, and the end is point B, which is where we want to, or the destination. And we're going to navigation area and set it to jump. And I'm also going to double check the move type is jump and not walk or teleport. And the speed multiplier, let's move this down to 2, for example. And we are going to Ctrl S to save, and I am going to hit play again. So now that's done, if I move and I click on the tile above, you can see that our avatar is jumping. Now it's jumping, it's like the jump is smooth. It's because we decreased the speed multiplier by 1, because it was 3 and now it's 2. So if I jump again, you can see that it's smooth. Now there's also the anchor, which we will talk about in a second. Now for the anchor, if we select this tree right here, you can see that the tree itself doesn't have, or this tool doesn't have an anchor itself. But if we expand it, you can see that it has something called an anchor. And it's so easy to create one, and I will show you how. In the room, in the hierarchy, if I right click and create an empty, I could give this empty object a name. So I could, for example, say anchor, and let's say 2. Now I am also going to get that tool, and I'm going to add an anchor on top of it. Now the easiest way to do it is if you select the anchor itself, or you select the object itself and Ctrl D and just move it. This will obviously create one. But let's say you have a different image or a different object you want the player to sit on, right? So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to take this rock, or this stone, for example. So I'm going to duplicate this stone, Ctrl D, and I'm going to move it. And I'm also going to change the scale of the stone. Let's say 2. And let's put 2 on the Y. And I'm also going to move it up a little bit. Actually, let's move the Y a little bit down, and I'm going to move it down like that. Now let's add an anchor on top of this. So now that we have a stone, I'm going to move this a little bit down, and I am going to remove the anchor that we just created, and I'm going to right click on the stone itself, and I'm going to say create empty, or hit create empty, and I'm going to call this anchor 2, for example. Or if you want to rename it, you can do F2 and then anchor, for example, stone. And now what we need here is, let me show you. If I select this one and I select the anchor, we need a box collider. Like I said, anything that you want to be interactive or you want to interact with, it must have a box collider. Tap handler, so you can tap on it, and an anchor script, which is a script that made by the package. You can set animation and you can also set it to tappable to make it that if you click on it, it will basically let you select it. And the Navmesh modifier, it removes the object, meaning that you won't be able to walk on this object. Now, if we select the stone right here and we go to the anchor stone, the first thing we need is a box collider. So add component, box collider. Now that's done. You are going to add an anchor script, and you're also going to add a tap handler, and you're also going to add a Navmesh modifier, and you're going to select remove object. Now, if you select the other one again, and if you double check here, you can see that this is a little bit smaller, and that's because you want the player to sit exactly right here. So you can mess around with this however you want. So if you select the stone again, and you select the anchor, now this anchor right here, you can move it up, for example, like that. And you can make it smaller, for example, the scale, like that. And you can rotate it however you want, if you want. And Control S to save. And you can also, or you'll also need to bake the Navmesh again. And hit play. Now if I move, and I click on this stone, you can see that we are sitting and it's rotating. We're sitting backwards. It's because of the rotation. If you expand the room and you select or you just select the stone on the scene, is right here. Expand the stone, select the anchor stone, and rotate it however you want. For example, try to rotate the Y. I think should be the Y. Yep, should be the Y. So for example, something like that. So let's say 160. Now take the 160 from here and exit the play mode. Go to the anchor stone or the stone itself and then the anchor stone and set this to 160 and hit enter. Save it, Control S and click play again. Now if we move around and we hit on the stone, you can see that that is so easy and so simple. So now that you know how to add all of this, let's say you have your own structure or you have your own texture and you want to replace the current ones. All you need is you select any of these because these are basically images, okay? Meaning that you can change whatever you want. You can download assets online, you can search on Google, you can make your own. If you're an artist, this is your chance to show off. So basically, if I select any of these objects, let's say this bush. Now this bush has something called bush in the sprite. If I click on it, it will take me to this thing right here. Now we have a bunch of different objects that we can choose from. And just to show you really quick, if you put an image here, a PNG image, it will not be like that. It will not have this arrow. You might wonder what is this arrow for, and I will show you in a second. But if you want to add an object, you can basically drag and drop this into the scene just like that. And then you set the order layer to whatever you want. So for example, if you want this box to be behind this rock, you select this rock and you see that it's -1. You select the box, you change its scale. You can do it using the scale tool, or you can do it using the inspector, which I always use. For example, let's say 3 and 3. Let's move it, and let's move it up a little bit. Now I want this box to be behind the rock, so I'm gonna set this to -2. And now it's behind the rock. It's because the stone is basically -1 and this is -2. Now, this is the easiest way or the simple way to actually just drag and drop stuff in here. And for example, the mushrooms, you can just drag and drop them in here. And you can put them in the background if you want. So for example, behind this tree or on the tree, but just something like that. And then you zoom in a little bit. You can rotate it. You can move it up a little bit. And you can select the tree. You see the tree is -2. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to set it to -3. But the bush is hiding it because it's -3 to -2, and it will hide it, and you can do -4 for example. And now you can see that the mushroom is showing on the screen. Now, if you want to convert your own images to sprites, you select the image that you want. I'm going to grab an image real quick and I'll come back. Okay, so now that I have this image, it's the hamster. I want to put this in the scene. So when you click on it, it doesn't have the arrow, and if you can't drag it and drop it in the scene, and that's because it's set to default and it's set to 2D. Now, you select the texture type and you choose Sprite 2D and UI. And when you select that, you basically scroll down, and the filter mode can be changed to point no filter, trilinear. Okay, there you go. And bilinear. But I'm gonna keep it bilinear for now, and the compression could be none or high quality or normal quality, up to you. And you hit apply. Now it's transparent and it's also sprite that can be moved and dropped into the scene. Now that we have the hamster right now, I'm sorry, this is just this is funny. You can move the hamster, for example, and you can put it on the tree. So for example, if you put it somewhere like this and you want to put it behind the tree, you set the layer to -3. Now the hamster is sneaking behind the tree, trying to get the mushroom, you know? Okay, so this is basically it. That's all you need to know. And that's how you add object to the scene or your own texture. And if you want to, for example, convert or change the texture for this tree, you basically select the tree, drag and drop the hamster in the sprite, and you can see here that the tree is now a hamster, and you can do Ctrl-Z to go back because who wants the tree as a hamster? And that is basically it. Now that you know how to do all of this, the next step would be importing the assets. Now you can see here there's something called asset catalog. And in the asset catalog, we actually have 3D assets, but more or less 3D assets also work with the 2D platform. If you go to Window and, or actually Highrise, and you go to Studio and then Asset Catalog, it will open up this asset catalog for you. If you scroll down, you can see here there's something called Leaderboard, and if you filter by smart objects, you're gonna find something called Word Radio. If you click Download, wait for it to install. And now that's done, we're gonna wait for the scripts to be compiled because it's basically a smart object. Now that's done, I'm going to click smart again, and I'm going to drag and drop this radio into our scene. So I'm gonna put it, for example, you can put it up over this box right here. That's done. If I hit F on the keyboard, it will zoom in to that radio. Now it's facing backwards, so I'm going to just move it a little bit up, and I'm going to rotate it maybe 90 degree on the Y or 180 degree. And you can also rotate it on the X a little bit if you want, and then you can rotate it on the Y a little bit like that. Now there is a small issue, which is the radio is being, or the background is over the radio, and to change this, you zoom out, you exit the 2D, pan the camera around, and you select the background right here. And if I select the parallax background and I move it backward a little bit to the back, sorry, I clicked F by leaving to click F. Oops, sorry again. We just zoom in again, and I'm gonna select the radio and click F. Now you can see that it's fixed. The background is not taking or cutting the radio anymore. And that's basically it. And let me show you how it is in game, because this radio actually animates and it looks pretty cool. So I'm gonna hit play. And if I move, you can see that the radio is actually playing. Now, if I exit the play mode and I select this radio, because this is an asset that's set or made by our staff or our artist, we have a script for you, and here there's something called URL. Now, whatever you put in here, or any shoutcast or radio station, it will be played in the world itself. So just put any world you want, or any URL you want here in the radio, and it will be played in the world. I'm going to select 2D again, and I'm going to remove this radio for now. I'm going to select the radio object, and I'm going to remove it. Now the same thing applies to everything, literally everything, including the leaderboard. So for example, if you download this, and if you drag, wait for it to compile, and select smart objects again, move this leaderboard and put it in here. Now it does look weird, and this is because you basically need to rotate it because it's a 3D object. So I'm going to select the scoreboard and I'm going to set the X to 0. Oops. Keep it 19, I'm kidding. And then move the Y to something like 45, I think. Minus 45. Yep, minus 45. And then I'm going to exit the 2D mode. And I'm going to move this front. And I'm also going to... Oh my god, there's going to be a lot of rotation in here. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this again. Something like that, maybe. Yep, and move it a bit like that. Perfect. So now that's done, we have a simple leaderboard that you can basically change or add your own script. And I'm going to hit play just to show you what it looks like in game. And now if I move, you can see here that I'm in front of the leaderboard. Now if you want the leaderboard to be in front of me, you basically select the leaderboard. So let me just move so I can select the leaderboard. Okay. And you want to select the whole thing. And I'm going to move this a little bit in front. And if I move, you can see here that the leaderboard is in front of our player. And if you move it back, it will be behind our player. And so on. So easy. Again, if we move a bit, you can see that the you can see that the hamster is hiding and moving, and that's because the hamster doesn't have a parallax script, but the tree has one. So if I select the tree, for example, it has 0.1. If I move, you can see that the hamster and the mushroom are moving. So if I exit the play mode and I select the mushroom and I add parallax script to it and I set this to 0.1, and I also select the hamster and I add a parallax script and I set this to 0.1 as well, save and click play, you should see now that they are moving at the same time. You can see that they move at the same time. And this is something that you can mess around however you want. But I like it that the hamster is actually moving as it's like sneaking. I'm going to remove the parallax script and I'm going to keep it that way. Okay, so now we talked about the asset catalog and how to import 3D assets. Let's say you want to import actual 2D assets and make the world look beautiful, or you want to buy assets, or you want to basically just get free ones on the internet. Go to Window. This is your first resource. Go to Asset Store. This will take you to the assetstore.unity.com. And here you can select or search for assets. But first you have to log in. So click on this little icon right here and click sign in or create a Unity account if you don't have one. Once you sign in, if you go to 2D here, or you search in the search for assets, but I'm going to basically click on 2D. And right here you can filter by popularity, or you can do, for example, price low to high. And then you can set the results for whatever you want, for example, 96 or anything. And this here you can find a bunch of different assets they can choose from. But I'm going to remove the on sales only. I'm going to keep 2D. And you can see here there are a bunch of different stuff that you can choose from. For example, there's something called Magic Lift Pixel Art. If you click on it, and it has a bunch of different stuff that you can choose from, which is not exactly what we want. So I'm going to search for some assets and see if I can find anything. So I spent some time and I found this really cool asset. It says it's called 2D Pixel Art Platformer. And it's because it has stone and trees. It also has a little farm, and it also has a parallax background, which is really cool. That's exactly what we want. So you can set the parallax background just or replace the one that we have. So I'm going to click on add to my assets. I'm going to accept the terms, and then I'm going to hit open in Unity and then open Unity editor. Just a quick note, I think you have to install the Unity Hub in order for you to start using the assets. So I'm going to go to the Unity Hub or unity.com downloads, and I'm going to download the Unity Hub by clicking download right. Once you finish installing Unity Hub, click enable or check run Unity Hub and click finish. Now that Unity Hub is installed, make sure you log in to your account. Now I'm not exactly sure why it's saying error refreshing assets, so I'm going to close the project and reopen it again. So if you want to close it, click on the close and go to the Studio Hub and just log in or load the project that you just created. Okay, so now that we loaded back into Unity, I'm going to go to Window and then Package Manager. And then I'm going to select my assets. Now it says refreshing assets. Now that our assets are refreshed, you can see here that I have 2D pixel art, which is the one that I just installed. Click download and wait for it to install. Now that's done, click on import. And here you can choose everything that you want. Basically all the files that you want. And there's also a demo scene, but I'm going to disable that. I'm going to disable the readme and I'm going to import. Now that's done, you can close this and you can go to the 2D pixel art platforms, which is right here. So now if you select these sprites that we have right here, and if you expand this, we have a bunch of different sprites that you can choose from. This is basically because set to multiply, which means that you have more than one to select from. And if you click on the sprite editor, you can see here that they already selected all the sprites for us we can choose from. And if we exit this one right here, and for example, let's add this scarecrow, right? So, or the pointer, for example. So I'm going to select the pointer and just going to put it in here. And you can set the order layer to whatever you want. And same goes for everything. For example, you can just mess around with this however you want. You can add a new tree, for example, all the way here. And you can set the order layer to -1, sorry. And same goes to everything. So for example, the well, you can put it right here. And you can also make it a little bit bigger if you want. So a little bit bigger. Up. And set the layer to -1. And just like that, you can basically create whatever you want. So now that our world's done, we can add some more effects to the lights, for example. So if you want to add post-processing just to make your scene look a little bit better, so let's just go ahead and clean a few things. So I'm going to remove these assets from here. I don't want them. I'm also going to remove this box. I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to keep the hamster. I'm going to keep, actually, let me remove the data board. And yeah, I'm just going to keep that for now. And I'm going to right click here and I'm going to create a volume, and it's a global volume. I'm going to call this TC for color correction. Hit enter and come to the inspector. Now in the profile, you're going to hit new, and this will create a new profile for you. Now if you add override and you select post-processing, there are a bunch of different stuff that you can choose from here. So for example, let's say bloom, and if you enable the threshold, intensity for example, the clamp, and the tint, and when you basically change the values here, you can see that our scene is a little bit lighter, and you can add overrides, post-processing, for example, lift, gamma, and gain. You can enable all of them by clicking all, and then you can choose, or you can start messing around with the colors however you want. Now this is really up to you. You can just make your own colors right here. You can, it's like editing a picture on Photoshop or like on PixArt or any other app or for photo editing. And same goes for all the other overrides. So you can just come here and mess around with this however you want. For example, vignette, and enable color, intensity, and smoothness. Just put the intensity up a little bit. Then the smoothness, for example. Just like that, you can create a better atmosphere, or something a little bit, to match your needs. And that's basically it. That's post-processing. So go ahead and add whatever you want here, and you should be good to go. So now that we are done with this, we want to upload this world to Highrise. So to do this, we are going to go to create.highrise.game, and we're going to sign in. Once you sign in, you go to dashboard, and then you go to creations, and you create a new world in the world section. So create a world, give your world a name, for example, my 2D template or platform, and then you can give it a description, and if you hover over the tooltip, it will show you an example on what the description would look like. This is my cool 2D world, for example. Create world, and now you should be able to give your world an info. and introduction. You can also change the name again. You can add tags. You can set the max visitor per room. The max visitors are 120, so you can set 120 here. Then you add tags, for example. I don't think you can add 2 letters. Yeah, so you can say, for example, template, platform, and then category, hangout, and you can give it a image. You can see now I have my 2D platform and it has the image, and now just hit save. That's done. You go back to Unity, and in Unity you click on the upload button and you select world and you select the my 2D platform, for example, and you hit on upload. Now you are going to receive this message and you're gonna hit on check status. This will take you to your world and you have to click on this one if you wanna see the status. And it says prepare building and prepare build, and it's also validating the assets. So just wait for this to load. So now that our build is done, there are a few things that you can do. So for example, if you go to the members, here you can see that I'm an owner. Now this world is uploaded to Highrise, but it's not released to the directory. Now there is one thing that you can do before you release it, because since it's still private, you can invite members, and you can, for example, search for creative world, which is my other account. If I invite this member, now this member will be able to join this world before it's released. But if you go to build, and you can see here that's still private, and if you click on release, this will release this world. But instead, I'm going to show you how you can view the world when it's private. I'm going to open Highrise. I'm going to go to the Worlds tab. I'm going to scroll all the way down. And you can see here something called My 2D Platformer. And if you click on it, you can see here that this is the thumbnail that we put, and this is the image, and here's the info. And we can join that world and you can follow it. But if you enter world, you can see that all the post-processing that we actually set is here. And when we zoom out, it's a little bit broken, which is something that you should fix later. You can just make the background bigger. And if you zoom in, for example, and if I move, you can see here that everything that we were seeing in Unity is actually working here, even the jumps. If you go all the way down, for example, click on there and click here. And just so you know, in Unity, you could also, for example, make a jump from here to here, or from here to whatever you want, just the way I showed you. And if you go and click on the tool or stone, you'll be able to sit on them, and just like that. And this is how you upload your world. Now this is going to be private between you and your friends. Unless you want to release it, you come here, click release, you set the version. Usually if it's beta, you go with 0.001 or you go with 1.0.0. You add release notes if you have, and you click on publish, and this world will be published. Now let's say you want to remove that world. You click on the 3 dots and you put this world in archive like that, and done. Then you can show archive here, and you can, for example, scroll down, find the world that we just created, which I don't know where. Okay, here, and you just click on here and restore world, and that's it. I hope you guys learned something new, and if you have any question, please head to our Discord server, Highrise, or discord.gg/Highrise, and our forum if you need any help from our community, or if you want to keep updated with the latest updates to our studio or our package. And if you want to stay informed or see the latest, you can follow Highrise Create on, or HR Create on Highrise. I will see you later or in another video maybe, and stay safe and enjoy creating.